Hello and welcome to episode number 54 of the Hafey Digital Podcast, a show for creators, makers, and doers, where my goal is to help you make to the max. My name is Ryan Hafey, and in this episode, I'm going to tell you a story about my recent film photography screw up. Let's get it. Hello, welcome to the show, everybody. By the way, fresh. I don't know why I said fresh, but a little reminder, Christmas is, 12 days away now? I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't feel like Christmas at all to me. I mean, granted, in Vegas, it's, we don't see snow very often. It's still it's down in the 50s, so it's a little bit colder, but it wasn't, recently, within the past couple weeks, we've been up in the 70s. And you're not out walking around as much through the stores where all the shelves are filled with all the Christmas stuff. So there's a lot of people who have decorated their houses. It feels like more people in the neighborhood decorated their houses this year than in years past. Just that the Christmas spirit, just with everything going on in the world, doesn't feel like Christmas. But I figured I'd add to it a little bit, some Christmas colors, green shirt, red hat, etc. So, hopefully that kind of adds to it. I don't know. Hey, by the way, thanks for being here. If you like what you're seeing so far, which isn't really much, hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening, and follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter. Let's have a conversation when this is all said and done. So like I said, I've got a story for you today, and it's about a recent shortcoming of mine that was very, very disappointing, and I only have myself to blame, and we're going to get into that. But first of all, a couple things to mention. So the first being, we're doing family portraits today for Christmas. Typically, every year we do family portraits, and we try to make them somewhat funny, or not the usual where everyone's just sort of sitting pretty and smiling for the camera. We try to do something that's a little bit entertaining, make people smile. We send it to kind of close family and relatives and post it online for people to see. But so that's coming up today. We're going to shoot those when it gets dark outside, just because there are some windows in the background, and I don't want. When the picture comes out, you'll see why. But I posted just a little setup video showing the setup, because everything right now is, I set it up a couple of days ago. We were actually going to shoot a couple of days ago, but life happened and we didn't have time to do it, so we're going to do it this evening. But in our loft, I have things set up. Got our couch, and we got the Christmas tree. I moved the Christmas tree behind the couch, and we're going to do the lighting setup is just going to be one overhead light that kind of shoots down on top of us, versus kind of like the standard, 45 degrees, often in front and a little bit to the side. And so it's going to have a little bit more of a dramatic feel, but I think it looks kind of cool. I posted a photo to it, I think just like the stories. This isn't going to do it justice, so I don't even know why I'm pulling this up here. But wonder if I can. No, I can't. I didn't put it on my computer. But this is for any of you watching. That's kind of, and I'm going to do a couple more things to it, but that's just a test shot that I took, so you can kind of see how the background is dark, and that's part of the reason why I went with that overhead lighting. Focus. That's part of the reason why I went with the overhead lighting, because I didn't want, and I don't have any grids to help control the lighting as much as I would like. So I went with some overhead lighting to prevent a lot of that light from spilling into the background. I have two other speed lights that I'm going to be using. One of them you may have noticed in that test picture. There was some red light on the ceiling. That was one of the speed lights being used, just with a red gel on it. And then I'm going to put another one out there with a green gel on it that's going to be shooting to the ceiling as well. Some little ambient lighting in the background. And we haven't exactly figured out what we're going to do that's funny this time around. We thought about, doing a thing like wearing masks or having someone sneeze and, pick in the picture and someone else, everyone else kind of like, freaking out, spraying Lysol. I don't know if we're going to do that or not. We might do something with our new, he's a puppy. He's almost a year old, but he's 110 pounds, and have him involved in some way. So we've got some time to think about it, but at least the setup is there. So if you want to see how I set everything up and what the lighting setup looks like and how everything's positioned, if you head over to my TikTok, should be just Ryan Hafey on TikTok, and there's a little video on there that kind of walks through that whole thing. But yeah, so moving on from that, yeah, I made a big mistake recently when it came to shooting a roll of film, and I wanted to tell that story. But I also wanted to talk just generally about film photography, because I think personally that everyone should shoot film at some point, or not even just once, like make a hobby out of it and do it regularly. And I would also encourage you to do it with something like this. This is an old school film camera. This is the Pentax MX. I've got a few different film cameras. I've got this one, which actually used to belong to my grandparents. And by the way, this was the camera that was used in the thumbnail. If you saw it, whoa, sorry about that. This was not the camera that I messed up on, but I used it in the thumbnail because you can actually take off the little focus prism on the top there, and it looks like it maybe fell apart. But it was actually this camera, the Pentax MX, that I had the screw up with, and this one does not have a removable focus prism. But this was developed in released in the 1970s. This one I think I just bought off of eBay. But if there are any Stranger Things fans out there, you may know Jonathan's character, and he's a photographer in the show, and he apparently, according to a couple articles I saw, the camera that he uses in the show is the Pentax MX. A lot of people thought it was the Pentax K1000. It's not. It's apparently, according to the props guy, a Pentax MX. So that was the reason why I wanted this particular model, and I was able to find it on eBay for a decent price. So I picked it up. But yeah, developed in the 70s. Everything on this is manual. So, now there is a little meter inside. I don't think I'm going to be able to, there's not going to be any way that I can show you through the viewfinder. But if you look through the viewfinder, there are little sensors in there, or just little windows in there that'll tell you what your aperture is. Although you do have to adjust the aperture manually on the lens. This is a 50 millimeter lens. And as you half press the shutter button here, there's a little light on the side, and it goes from red, yellow, green, yellow, red. And obviously if you're the top red, then you're overexposed. If you're the bottom red, then you're underexposed. Obviously the goal is to get it in green before you take your picture. But to get your picture, you have to adjust not only your exposure, but also your focus. So, and this uses, I think it's called split focus, where basically as you turn this wheel here and you look through the viewfinder, you'll kind of see in the center where the picture sort of splits, and there's like a little circle in the center, and the goal is to line up the images so that everything looks in focus. Hard to explain without you seeing it, but once you look through the viewfinder and kind of turn it a little bit, you get the idea of how it works. On here, you have your aperture. Let's go back to this here. Maybe zoom in a little bit as well. So this is the aperture ring. This is a 50 millimeter lens, f1.4 by the way, so you can get some super crazy depth of field and let in a lot of light with this. So you have to adjust that manually. Over here is your shutter speed. You have fewer shutter speed options than you would on a traditional digital camera, but you can do bulb, which means you can just hold down the shutter and let it go, all the way up from 1 second up to 1/1000th of a second. And oh, by the way, unlike on traditional digital cameras, the ISO that you set is dictated by the film you're using. So in my case, I use this Kodak Ultramax, which is, I really like how this comes out. This is a 400 speed film, which the 400 is essentially referring to the ISO that you would set on the camera. So if you look here, let's see if I get any closer. Nope, that's as close as I can get. But this little dial here, if you move this, how do I do it? I forget how. Oh, you have to push this little metal button down and then turn it, and that'll change the ISO speed that you have set. So you basically just set it to whatever the ISO speed is of your film, and you know you're going to be shooting essentially at what would be ISO 400. So then based on that, you can set your aperture and your shutter speed to get the exposure that you want. But you know, it takes a while to set up shots with these. You really have to be thinking about what you want to do. No autofocus, so you have to, in most cases, unless you can set it up in advance to be ready to just click the shutter when you need to click it, it takes a little bit of time to set up. And it's definitely not something I've mastered, but it does have a hot shoe. You could use flash photography with this, and it's built like a tank. This thing is very heavy for its size. It's even got a little timer. If you press this little dial down and hit the shutter, it'll count down from, I don't know exactly what the time length is on the shutter, but it's just kind of cool to have that as an option. But yeah, if you want to get a much better understanding of how exposure works and really get a good grasp of all that, film photography is one way to really learn that. And by the way, you can't emulate the look of film in digital. It's just not possible. I've shot a few rolls of film over the past few years, and every time I get those rolls back, I'm super ecstatic with the way that they came out. There's just a look, and there's like this natural grain that you get with it that you can't get from digital. And it just creates this really, really cool vibe. I've posted some in the past before. I should have prepared some film shots that I've taken today, but I didn't. But I'm a very big fan of film photography, so you should get into that if you can. But that brings me to the story of how I messed up big time, and you'll have to excuse me for just a minute. It's that time of the year. No, I don't have the Rona, but you know, it's a little chilly, and when it gets a little cold, the nose starts to dribble a little bit. So here's the story. So as I talked about in the past couple episodes, we had a fight week, boxing, a big pay-per-view fight out of Dallas, Texas, and I was scheduled to go to that fight week and just cover content, but also, you know, do fight week photography. And you know, so obviously I brought my digital camera, and I figured, hey, I would, you know, I haven't shot film for a while, and it was a really big event that I was pretty excited about. Figured, you know what, might as well bring the film camera along. It's been a while since I've shot film, and why not document it with a film camera? I was doing this for my own personal reasons. So, you know, no one was relying on these photos for anything, but it still meant a lot to me. But anyway, so I bring the film camera, I load it up before I leave. Again, I'm using the Kodak 400. This is a 36 exposure film, and load it up, go to fight week, and I'm being very selective with my shots. I try to get a little bit of everything, capture some of the bubble precautions that are being taken, you know, some of the fight week events like the press conferences and the weigh-in. Tried to take some shots with the film camera from those events. And even on fight night, as I'm shooting ringside, I was able to capture some shots with it as well. So the week's going great. Having a lot of fun using the film camera, getting a lot of great shots. Fight night comes around, and I remember, I'll come back to that, because I don't want to give away the punchline here. But so basically what happened was I finished the roll of film, pack it up, and then I come back home. And there's this photo place that I've been going to, you know, because a lot of these photo development places have closed down just because film photography's not that, not a lot of people are shooting film anymore, for obvious reasons. But there is this one place called the 1 Hour Photo Shack in Las Vegas, and I've developed a few rolls of film there previously. So I do want to preface it by saying that I have shot film, and I know how to shoot film, and I know how to load film. But I will also say that it's been a many number of months, like maybe even up to a year or so, since I've last shot any film. So it's a little rusty. But went to this photo shack, and they give you the option to they'll take your film and not just give you prints, but you have the option for them to digitize them and send you a link where you can download the images in digital form, which is typically what I do. I don't currently know how to develop film, although that would be kind of a cool. Do they make like film photography, like at home development kits? I feel like I've looked for that before, but there wasn't really like a good at home kit for that I saw. And if there's not, especially right now, like I feel like film photography has made a little bit of a resurgence in the past few years. So maybe that would be kind of a cool little just a Christmas gift or just gift idea for someone. I would buy it. But anyway, so yeah, so I hand the film off at this place and just let them do the processing, let them do the digitizing and send me the digital versions of it. So filled the envelope, dropped the film in there, hand it off to them, and I wait patiently for them to email me the link of the photos. So a couple days goes by, and then I get a phone call, and it's the Photo Shack place. He said, "Hi, Ryan. Yeah, so just want to let you know, unfortunately, none of your photos were exposed." And immediately my heart sank, because I'm like, oh no. And what it was, and in retrospect, I realize what happened now, and I'll talk about that. But basically, it was a stupid error. It was a loading error. I loaded the film incorrectly, plain and simple. And they were nice enough to say, hey, we'll refund you your money, which is great and all, but I really, really wanted these pictures because this would be the first time that I've ever shot with a film camera ringside. And granted, I probably only maybe snapped 5 or 6 photos ringside, but like just to have those would have been so freaking cool. And I'll have an opportunity to do it again, but it was just such a disappointment. So what I realized after thinking about it for a little bit is I just loaded the film incorrectly. And I remember being ringside at one point, and I took a photo, and then I looked down, and, because on any film photo here, or on any film camera, on the top right there, it's going to tell you how many exposures you've taken so far. And as I mentioned, this is a roll of 36 exposure film. So you can take 36 photos with this roll of film. And, I was taking a photo ringside, and I looked down, and the photo count was on like 40. So I'm like, oh, well, I've taken a few too many photos. And it didn't occur to me in that moment that I shouldn't even have been able to wind this up to 40. It was fight night. A lot was happening. I wasn't really thinking about it. It was like, oh, well, I guess, I've already used up all the photos. I'll just put this back in my bag, and then we'll just develop the film when we get back. So, yeah. So that's basically, basically explains everything that happened. It's just that the film was never loaded properly and why it wasn't loaded properly. So take this particular camera here. Let's go back to this. I'm going to zoom out just slightly. Okay. If you open this up, this is what the back of the camera looks like. By the way, just a little fun illustration if you want to kind of see how this works. So this is on bulb mode right now, but just to kind of show you how this looks when you take a photo. If you hit the shutter and hold it, it's going to open up there, and now you can kind of see through. And if this was a real photo, it would be exposing the film for this long at the moment. You let go, shutter closes, and there you go. You've got your exposure. Now, when you go, now common sense, so obviously the film roll is going to go here, right? And then you're going to pull this out, and you're going to connect the other end of the film. There's these little prongs here, and the film has these little holes that fit within, those prongs fit in the holes. And when you crank the film, it's going to move these so that it's going to pull the film across so that you can have a new exposure. And you would think because you're cranking it this way, you're going to crank it out like this, you would assume that everything, this wheel and this wheel, is going to move in that direction from left to right. But I want you to watch what happens when I crank this film. I don't know if that translated on camera there, but basically what happens is this white part, which is where you sort of feed one end of the film in, turns counterclockwise versus clockwise. When I loaded the film, got everything correctly, got the prongs set in, these little things set in correctly, and I put the film inside of this little white part here, so that, assuming that it would turn clockwise. But because it turns counterclockwise, what happened was it essentially just spat that end of the film out. So every time I would take a picture and cycle the film and go to a new exposure, it just wasn't pulling the film at all. So the film never got exposed because the film just wasn't being, wound through that spindle or whatever you want to call it. And that is my big photography fuck up. Such a stupid mistake. And resulted in no film for me from the trip. I mean, obviously I have all the digital photos that I took, and I was relatively happy with how those photos turned out. I talked about that in last week's episode, just kind of that experience. But yeah, I was real bummed. And the other thing that kind of annoyed me and was a bit of a bummer is I decided, because that was the last roll of film that I had that I put in that camera. So like, okay, well, I'll buy some more film, and then we'll just try it again whenever we get the chance. I looked, because I bought this on Amazon before. I looked on Amazon again, and this film, when I bought it the last time, was like $15, $16 for 4 of these, 4 36 exposure rolls. Looked again, and it was like $35, $36 for the same amount. So the price had more than doubled over the course of maybe a couple of years. So that was a bit of a bummer. Also, a little insult to injury. But man, it is what it is. Life happens. You live and you learn. But I can tell you for a fact, next time I go to shoot a roll of film, I'm not going to be making that mistake. I just wish there was an easier way, and maybe there is an easier way that I know of, but I wish there was an easier way to know for a fact that the film is loaded correctly. And I guess you could technically, while the back is still open, because when you load a roll load a roll of film in a film camera like this, usually the first 2 exposures are just throw out exposures, because obviously if you open the back of the film camera and expose it to any light whatsoever, it's going to ruin the picture. So because when you load the film, we'll just show it again. Hold on. There we go. When you load the film, I was moving my mouse over here. you're going to be moving the film along this plane here. So just to load it, you're going to have about this much film that's going to be exposed to a bunch of light, and it would be ruined anyway. So I guess I imagine I could, next time around, put it in there, wind it up still with the back open before closing the back plate, just to make sure that everything's loaded correctly. And I assume that's probably what I'll do next time, just to make sure. But man, sucks. Really sucks. But anyway, that's the story, and I'm hoping that I'll have another opportunity to do it soon. I assume I could, I guess I could just load up some more film and shoot around here, but really with being stuck at home, there's not a lot of interesting stuff that I haven't already photographed around here that I would be interested in having in film. So, I don't know. I could use it around the Christmas time. Anyway, hey, if you like what I had to tell you here, if you liked story time, I'd appreciate it if you give me a follow on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter, and also hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening. And I know I did that backwards, but that's okay. But that's going to end story time. That's going to end this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we're going to call this one done for now. So, in the meantime, keep on creating, making, and doing, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.